He thought humiliating her would make him look stronger, but he had no idea he was stepping into a moment that would flip everything in seconds. The gym pulsed with energy that afternoon, the sharp clang of iron plates echoing off the concrete walls, the air thick with sweat and confidence as men pushed their limits under bright fluorescent lights. Derek Coleman stood at the center of it all, 6'2", built like he belonged on a magazine cover, the kind of guy who never questioned his place in a room like this. People laughed when he spoke, moved when he walked, watched when he trained. Control came naturally to him, and today, he was looking for something to entertain himself. That's when Ava Brooks walked in. She didn't make an entrance. No dramatic music, no heads turning at first glance. Just a quiet step through the door, wearing a faded blue shirt, gray jeans, and simple sneakers, her posture relaxed, her eyes steady but uninterested in attention. She moved like someone who didn't need to prove anything, which in a place like this, only made her stand out more. Derek noticed her almost immediately, not because she demanded it, but because she didn't. He watched her for a second longer than necessary, then smirked, already deciding what role she would play in his afternoon. "You lost?" he called out, his voice cutting through the noise just enough to draw attention. A few nearby heads turned. Curiosity sparked, the beginning of a scene forming before anyone fully realized it. Ava didn't respond. She simply set her small bag down by the wall and adjusted her sleeves, her movements calm, deliberate, almost too composed for someone being singled out. That silence, it irritated him. Derek stepped closer, his presence filling the space around her, his confidence growing as the room slowly shifted its focus toward them. "This isn't a beginner's class," he added, a hint of laughter in his tone now, inviting others to join in. And they did, not loudly at first, but enough. Enough to build something. Enough to turn a moment into a stage. Ava finally looked up, not defensive, not afraid, just steady. And in that brief, quiet exchange, something subtle changed. But Derek didn't see it. Not yet. And neither did anyone else. The laughter did not fade. It grew sharper, more confident, feeding off Derek's presence like it always did. A few guys leaned against the weight racks, arms crossed, waiting for the moment to unfold, while others slowed their workouts just enough to watch without making it obvious. In a place like this, attention was currency, and Derek knew exactly how to spend it. He took another step closer, close enough that the difference between them became almost exaggerated, his height, his size, his certainty towering over her calm stillness. "You know, people get hurt when they walk into places they do not understand," he said, his tone lower now, but still loud enough for the surrounding circle to hear. It was no longer just a joke. It was a warning dressed as humor. Ava did not step back. She did not argue. She simply stood there, her hands relaxed at her sides, her breathing steady, her gaze level. That composure unsettled him more than any reaction could have. Derek tilted his head slightly, studying her as if trying to figure out what he had missed, but pride pushed the thought away before it could fully form. Around them, the room tightened. Phones were no longer subtle. A few whispers passed between onlookers, curiosity mixing with anticipation. Someone muttered, "This should be good," under their breath. Derek gave a small laugh, shaking his head as if amused by her silence. "Let me guess," he continued, pacing a slow half-circle around her. "You watched a couple of videos and thought you could just walk in here and keep up." A few louder chuckles followed that, the kind that encouraged him to go further. He raised his hands slightly, not aggressive, but performative, inviting a reaction, inviting a moment. "Tell you what," he said, stopping directly in front of her again. "We keep it simple. You show us something. Anything. Or you can just walk out and save yourself the trouble." The words hung in the air, heavier than before. It was no longer about him alone. It was about the audience, the expectation, the pressure pressing in from every side. Ava's eyes flickered for just a second, not with fear, but with something quieter, something deeper, like a memory passing behind them too fast to catch. Her fingers curled slightly, then relaxed again. The shift was small, almost invisible, but it was there. Derek did not see it. He was already smiling, already certain of how this would end. The room waited, and in that waiting, something irreversible had already begun. The silence stretched just long enough to make the moment uncomfortable, like the entire room was holding its breath without realizing it. Ava lowered her gaze briefly, not in submission, but as if aligning something within herself, her shoulders settling, her posture shifting in a way so subtle it barely registered to anyone watching. Derek took that as hesitation. His smile widened, confidence returning in full force, fed by the quiet murmurs building around them. "That is what I thought," he said, his voice carrying a note of finality, as if the outcome had already been decided. A few people began to lose interest, assuming the scene would fade into nothing, just another moment where someone realized they did not belong. But Ava did not move toward the exit. Instead, she took a slow step forward, closing the small gap between them. It was not aggressive. It was not dramatic. It was simply intentional. That single step shifted the energy in a way no one could quite explain. Derek noticed it, just for a fraction of a second, a flicker of uncertainty passing through his expression before he masked it with a chuckle. "You are serious?" he asked, tilting his head, as if amused by the idea. Ava met his eyes fully now, her voice quiet but clear when she finally spoke. "You said anything." The words were simple, almost soft, but they landed differently than anyone expected. The room stilled again, attention snapping back into place. Phones lifted higher. Someone whispered, "Wait, what?" Derek exhaled through his nose, rolling his shoulders as if preparing for something light, something controlled, something he believed he could manage without effort. "All right," he said, raising his hands again in a casual stance, still playing to the crowd, still certain this was his stage. "Do not say I did not warn you." Ava did not mirror him. She did not raise her hands the same way. She simply stood there, balanced, her weight evenly distributed, her eyes focused not on his size, not on his presence, but on something smaller, more precise, as if she was already seeing movements that had not yet happened. Another beat of silence passed. It felt heavier now, different. Even the people who had been laughing earlier felt it, though none of them could explain why. Derek stepped in, expecting the moment to unfold the way it always did, expecting control, expecting reaction. But the second he moved, the rhythm broke. Ava shifted, not fast, not exaggerated, just enough to change the line between them, her timing exact, her motion efficient, and suddenly Derek was no longer leading the moment. The room did not react immediately. It took a second for everyone to realize something had gone off script. And in that single second, everything changed. What happened next did not look dramatic at first, and that was exactly why no one understood it until it was already over. Derek stepped forward with the same confidence that had carried him through every situation like this before, expecting resistance, expecting hesitation, expecting to control the pace. But Ava did not resist. She did not retreat either. She simply moved with him, just slightly off his line, her timing precise in a way that felt almost effortless. For a brief second, it looked like nothing had changed, like the moment would continue exactly as everyone predicted. Then Derek's balance shifted. Not in a way that looked forced, not in a way that drew immediate attention, but just enough that his control slipped without warning. Ava's movement followed through naturally, guided by that single opening, her posture steady, her focus unbroken. There was no struggle, no chaos, no wild motion. Just a clean, controlled redirection that turned his own momentum against him. And then it was done. Derek found himself lowered to the mat, not slammed, not thrown in a way that caused harm, but placed there with undeniable finality, his expression frozen in disbelief as he tried to process what had just happened. The sound of movement in the gym stopped. Completely. The weights, the conversations, the background noise that had filled the space just seconds ago disappeared into a silence so sharp it felt almost unreal. Phones that had been recording remained lifted, but no one spoke. No one laughed. Ava stepped back immediately, creating space, her breathing unchanged, her expression calm, as if the moment had not required anything more than simple focus. Derek stayed where he was for a second longer than expected, his mind racing to catch up with what his body had already experienced. He pushed himself up slowly, eyes scanning the room, then landing back on her, searching for something that would explain it, something that would restore the narrative he had built in his head. But there was nothing there except quiet certainty. Ava did not look at him with pride, or anger, or even satisfaction. She simply looked at him the way she had from the beginning, steady, composed, unaffected. And in that silence, something shifted in the room that could not be undone, because for the first time, everyone realized they had not been watching a joke unfold. They had been witnessing a truth reveal itself in real time. No one moved. The silence did not just linger. It settled, heavy and undeniable, pressing down on every person in the room. Just moments ago, this had been entertainment, a quick joke, something to pass the time between sets. Now, it felt like something else entirely. Derek stood up slowly, his movements no longer careless or exaggerated, but measured, almost cautious, as if he was recalibrating not just his balance, but his understanding of what had just happened. His eyes stayed on Ava, searching, questioning, trying to find a crack in her composure, something that would make sense of the outcome. But there was nothing to find. She stood exactly as she had before, shoulders relaxed, breathing even, her presence quiet but unmistakably firm. Around them, the crowd began to shift, not physically at first, but mentally. The same people who had laughed earlier now avoided eye contact, their expressions tightening as realization replaced amusement. A few lowered their phones, unsure whether they had just witnessed something impressive or something they were not supposed to see. Someone cleared their throat, the sound sharp in the stillness, but it only emphasized how completely the atmosphere had changed. Derek exhaled, a slow, controlled breath, his pride catching up with him, urging him to respond, to say something, to reclaim the space that had slipped from his grasp. But the words did not come as easily as before. "You got lucky," he said finally, though the conviction was not there, not fully. It sounded more like something he needed to hear than something he believed. Ava did not respond. She did not correct him. She did not challenge him either. She simply held his gaze for a brief moment, long enough for the weight of that silence to say everything words could not. Then she looked away. That, more than anything, unsettled him. Not anger, not defiance, just indifference. As if the moment that had just reshaped the room did not belong to her, did not define her, did not require acknowledgement. She stepped back toward her bag, her movements unhurried, unaffected by the attention that still clung to her from every corner of the gym. And as she reached down to pick it up, the unspoken truth settled deeper into the room, not loud, not dramatic, but impossible to ignore. Strength was never what it looked like from a distance. And the people who understood it best were usually the ones who never had to prove it at all. The moment should have ended there, but it did not. Silence like that does not disappear quickly. It lingers, it stretches, it forces people to confront what they just witnessed whether they want to or not. Ava slung her bag over her shoulder with the same calm precision she had shown from the beginning, her movements unhurried, as if the entire scene had been nothing more than a brief interruption in her day. But the room was no longer the same room she had walked into. Conversations did not restart right away. The clanging of weights did not resume. Instead, there was hesitation, a quiet recalibration as everyone tried to place her into a category that now no longer fit. Derek remained where he was, standing but not fully. Present, his jaw tight, his posture caught somewhere between pride and uncertainty. He looked around, not directly at anyone, but aware of every pair of eyes that had shifted, every silent judgment that now hung in the air. For the first time, he was not the center of admiration. He was the center of realization. Someone near the back finally spoke, a low voice, almost cautious. How did she do that? No one answered. Not because they did not want to, but because no one could explain it in a way that matched what they had just seen. It had been too clean, too controlled, too effortless to fit the assumptions they had built just minutes earlier. Ava adjusted the strap on her shoulder and turned toward the exit, her gaze forward, her expression unchanged. She did not acknowledge the room, did not look for approval, did not wait for a reaction. And that absence of need, that complete detachment from the attention she now held, made her presence even more powerful. As she walked past the line of machines and benches, people instinctively moved just slightly, creating space without being asked. Not out of fear, but out of something closer to respect, though none of them would say it out loud. Derek finally found his voice, but it came quieter than before, stripped of its earlier edge. "Who are you?" The question hung behind her, not loud, but clear enough to reach. Ava paused for just a fraction of a second, not turning around, not offering a full response. Then she spoke, her voice steady, almost reflective. Someone who does not need to prove anything. And with that, she kept walking, leaving behind a room that would not forget what it had just learned, even if it took them a while to understand it fully. The door closed softly behind her, but the impact of her presence stayed in the room like an echo that refused to fade. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then slowly, the gym began to breathe again. A weight dropped somewhere in the corner, too loud for the moment, drawing a few uneasy glances. Conversations tried to restart, but they sounded different now, lower, more cautious, as if everyone was aware that something invisible had shifted. Derek remained where he was, his hands resting on his hips, his chest rising and falling as he stared toward the door she had just walked through. He replayed the moment over and over in his mind, trying to find the mistake, the angle, the explanation that would restore the version of reality he was used to. But every time he ran it back, the result was the same. Clean, controlled, unquestionable. One of the guys who had been watching earlier stepped closer, his voice hesitant. Man, that was not luck. Derek did not respond right away. His jaw tightened slightly, but there was no immediate comeback, no sharp remark to regain control. Another voice chimed in from behind, quieter, almost thoughtful. She did not even try hard. That landed differently. Not loud, not mocking, but heavy in its honesty. Derek exhaled slowly, running a hand over the back of his neck, the gesture less about frustration and more about processing something unfamiliar. Across the room, a younger member who had been recording lowered his phone, staring at the screen like he had just captured something he did not fully understand. I have never seen movement like that, he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. The group that had gathered earlier began to disperse, but not with the same energy they had before. There was no laughter now, no casual dismissal. Instead, there was a quiet awareness, a shared realization that what they had witnessed was not just a moment of surprise, but a lesson none of them had expected to learn. Derek finally turned away from the door, his posture no longer dominating the space, but grounded in something more real. For the first time, he looked around not as the strongest person in the room, but as someone who had just been shown a different definition of strength. And even though he would not say it out loud, even though pride still held part of him back, the truth had already settled in. Some people do not walk into a room to prove anything. They walk in already knowing exactly who they are. And that kind of confidence does not need an audience. Outside, the late afternoon light stretched across the parking lot, casting long shadows that moved slowly with the passing clouds. And Ava walked through it without changing her pace, as if the world beyond those gym doors had never shifted at all. Inside, however, the moment continued to ripple outward, growing quieter but deeper, settling into conversations that no longer sounded the same. A few people gathered near the entrance, glancing toward the glass doors, half expecting her to come back in, as if they needed confirmation that what they had seen was real. One of them shook his head, still staring at the spot where she had stood minutes ago. She did not even look nervous, he said, almost in disbelief. Another replied, that was not something you learn in a few classes. Their voices carried a different tone now, not dismissive, not amused, but reflective, like they were trying to piece together a story that had been hidden in plain sight. Derek stood a little further back, listening without joining, his expression quieter than it had ever been in that room. He replayed her final words in his head, not with frustration this time, but with something closer to understanding. Someone who does not need to prove anything. The sentence stayed with him, heavier now, more personal. For years, strength had meant being seen, being recognized, being the one others measured themselves against. But what he had witnessed challenged that idea in a way he could not ignore. Across the gym, the younger member who had recorded the moment began to show the clip to a small group, their reactions muted but intense, eyes widening not at the outcome, but at the precision, the control, the simplicity of it all. Look at this, he said, pausing the video at the exact second everything shifted. She was already ahead before he even moved. The group leaned in closer, studying it frame by frame, searching for the secret, the technique, the detail that explained it. But the more they looked, the clearer it became that it was not just about movement. It was about something deeper, something built over time, something that did not reveal itself until it had to. Derek finally turned away, walking back toward the weights, but his steps were different now, slower, more deliberate. He picked up a bar, then paused. staring at his reflection in the mirror for a moment longer than usual. The image looking back at him had not changed, but the way he saw it had. And somewhere between that reflection and the memory of what had just happened, a quiet realization settled in, one that would stay long after the noise of the gym returned to normal. Strength, real strength, was never about who made the most noise in the room. It was about who could remain completely still and still change everything. The gym eventually returned to its rhythm, but it was not the same rhythm it had before. The sounds came back in layers, weights clinking, footsteps crossing the rubber floor, quiet conversations rebuilding themselves. Yet beneath it all, something had changed in a way no one could fully ignore. It was not loud. It was not obvious. But it was there, lingering in the way people looked at each other, in the way they thought before speaking, in the way confidence was no longer measured the same way it had been just an hour earlier. Derek continued his workout, but each movement carried a different weight, not heavier in pounds, but heavier in meaning. He was no longer performing. He was thinking. Every repetition, every breath, every glance in the mirror reminded him of a moment that had taken only seconds but had quietly dismantled years of assumption. Across the room, others felt it too. The younger members who once laughed the loudest now spoke more carefully, their voices lower, their curiosity stronger than their judgment. The video that had been recorded circulated quietly between a few phones, not as a joke, but as something almost instructional, something worth studying. Not for the outcome, but for the control, the timing, the calm. Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting a softer light across the pavement, and Ava was already gone, blending back into a world that had no idea what had just happened inside those walls. She did not stay to explain. She did not stay to teach. She did not stay to be recognized. And that absence became its own kind of presence, a reminder that the most powerful people are often the ones who leave without a trace. Back inside, Derek paused once more, gripping the bar in front of him, his reflection steady in the mirror. For the first time, he did not see himself as the strongest person in the room. He saw himself as someone still learning. And strangely, that did not feel like a loss. It felt like clarity, because strength, real strength, was never about overpowering someone else or proving something to a crowd. It was about understanding control, respecting what you do not yet know, and recognizing that the quietest person in the room might be the one who changes everything without ever raising their voice. And long after that day, long after the moment had passed and the story had faded into memory, the lesson remained, not spoken, not written, but understood by